And one more time. Hello, everybody. Gośka Tur on this side. I am sitting comfy at my home in Poland, Warsaw, with snow outside the window. And please write in the chat window where you're from and what the weather is outside, because I have maybe some -5 degrees outside, but I see a person from Malaysia here, or some people with palm trees behind. So maybe we are in really different climate zones even. And we gathered together to have a talk about how to prepare our online events in the best way, with the focus on registration process. And you might be asking, why a registration process? Why such a small detail? Still, I believe that this moment when you meet your participant is very important, because the details are not the details, they make the product. If you make a bad impression on the participants or potential participants of your event, they will think of you maybe some bad things, or maybe they will resign from registering in total, or they will get frustrated. And in SCI, Service Civil International, which is the organizer of this event, we had a couple of cases when we simply screwed things up because we were not used to online work. So there were cases last year when we were asking people to register for an event, and then we were discovering that we actually changed the schedule, so people have to register for other online sessions again. And then, oh no, something happened again, and we had to repeat the process. And what we got in the end was a bunch of frustrated activists who were kind enough to re-register for 3 times, but they were quite angry. And I was one of those people registering for the event, so I was also sitting there frustrated and thinking, oh no, I don't want it to happen. So if we are to stay in the online world, let's try to become as professional as possible while getting participants for our training courses, workshops, webinars, events. Before we start, just a quick question to the group and a quick poll. I would like to ask you, what's your experience with regards to organizing online events? And I have launched a poll. So please read one of those long answers, choose the one that describes you the best, and vote. While you are voting, I can tell you that so far in the registration process, when we asked you what's your knowledge about Google Forms, the average was a bit above 3 out of 5, so like more than average knowledge. So we are not newcomers here, maybe with exception of 1 or 2 people. So I took it into account while preparing the webinar. 3 seconds more for those who vote. And in the meantime, I'm happily reading the notes from you in the chat. Yeah, I see some intercontinental travel involved. Ismi from Indonesia, but in Bulgaria, Brita from Germany with fire on. And let's see what kind of experience we have in the group. So I will share the results of the poll. And most of you are at this learning phase, and so am I. I am not a PhD in webinar organizing, or I don't have PhD in making registration forms. I had to learn it through practice, and of course the last year was most, how to say, intensive, because I work as a trainer on a daily basis, and here during this webinar, I would like to share some of the knowledge and tips with you. So, what's in the program for today? Let's go back to our presentation. So, in the program, we have kind of a nice menu Many because we invited you to eat during the webinar or have some snack, dinner, lunch, and there we'll have an appetizer, top 5 mistakes of online registration. Then the main course will be hidden wonders of Google Forms with some attention to the questions you asked. There will be the Brussels sprout of the webinar. And why a Brussels sprout? It's a vegetable that in Europe nobody likes, maybe with exception of a few freaks. And yet you find it at quite many soups. So the plan for today is that we will touch the privacy policy and data protection, a topic that nobody wants to touch. But fortunately, we have an expert from currently Belgium, Chantal Doran, who is willing to share her tips with us how to make the registration form respecting data protection. And for dessert at the end, before 1:30, there will be some discussion time. We'll see how long and on which topics. And here, a small disclaimer, we talk about tools that help us to get our registration done for an online event. So it's not an event, how to make an interactive workshop. This will happen at another webinar at the end of February that we'll announce by the end of this event. So ready to jump in? Ready to meet the top 5 mistakes that I have noticed in online registrations? Okay, let's start, let's listen, and please, in the meantime, think what mistakes you have noticed when you were registering for online events or preparing a process, and also maybe what tips you might have, because I will ask you if you would like to share anything with the rest of the group once I share my top 5. So, the first common problem nowadays is that you ask too much information during the registration. You are more like an interrogator, and this poor participant is there seeing this very long registration form and thinking, oh gosh, am I registering for a 2-hour workshop, or am I getting married to someone? And some of the questions that you might really think if they are needed are here on the slide. So there is the telephone. Do you really need it? Maybe in some cases, yes. In most, I doubt. And people don't like giving their telephone numbers. Do you really need to know the gender of the person? Or very detailed information like date of birth, father's name, and even the age. Here I have a question. In the registration form about the online, so in the registration form for this webinar, we asked you about your age. Can you write in the chat window, did it bother you? Did it bother you? Did you get maybe like a bit upset that we asked you about your age? If you could write in the chat if it was yes or no. Did it bother you that we asked about your age? So far, no. And another question is, how do you think, why could I be interested in your age? Why would it help me today during this webinar? If anybody has an idea, feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat. Why would I need your age? I see Britta from SCI Germany is in the online world already, and in the world or financed events. We are here co-financed by the European Youth Foundation. And indeed, we need the age of the participants for the statistics, because we also have some indicators, how many people under the 30 years of age or over. So in our case, it was natural. We wanted to know. We also were curious about the countries you come from, but maybe in some of the cases, it's really irrelevant. And yeah, so this is mistake number 1 that I noticed in online forms: too many questions, too much information asked, even for a short webinar or workshop. What else can make you end up in not the best position. So mistake number 2 will be too little information. So you prepare a registration form, you publish it, but then you forget to ask about something important. I don't know if you ever had this situation, but I took part in so many events in the last year that I could already observe a few times that we had not enough information gathered. And then we had to ask people again to fill in the registration form or to fill another registration form, another survey. And you know probably how hard it is to get people fill in something. You often have to send a number of reminders. And in the end, still there will be 1, 2, 3 people who will not do it. So some of the things that I noticed that they were forgotten in some registration forms, and now don't laugh, but it was really true, email address or name. These were things that were missing from time to time. So it could be a postal address even, like we had a training course last year when we wanted to send chocolate bars to the participants. At that time, we knew that we want to collect the postal address only to of the accepted participants. But maybe in some cases you would like to have the address already from the very beginning because you want to send some prom material, if not a Swiss chocolate. So in this case, a postal address is something needed. Then declaration of attendance. If you want people to declare which workshops they will attend, or if you want them to declare that they will attend the whole event. Because often what you want to do, if you have a training course comprising of a few sessions, you want the participants to attend the whole duration of the event. And in the registration form, it's very useful to include kind of a disclaimer. I declare I will, or I commit myself to attend the whole duration of the event. If your project requires a follow-up activity, you might include a note, like a box to check. I declare to commit to a follow-up activity, or I declare I will do a follow-up activity before the end of February or so. So this is something that you might be indeed needing. And it's always good to run your registration form with some other person or test it yourself. Sometimes we had cases like this. There are 2, 3, 4 people checking the form. They say, wow, it's beautiful, great. And then there is still a problem. So let's not worry maybe too much. Nobody's perfect. But then there is one thing that makes me really angry. I don't have a PhD in registration forms preparation, but I have an MA in sociology. So I am very, for me, good forms are very important, and forms that don't have methodological mistakes. And here I want to show you some, well, a form that's a form that is something you wouldn't like to fill in. So let me share another screen with you. And I will need your inputs here. So I will just have a look at your faces. If you can note that you already see the new screen, the very bad registration form. Can you see it? Share it? No. Okay. A few of you are already seeing it and nodding. As usually, we need to be patient with Zoom. And here, have a look. Maybe to make it a bit bigger for you. So there's the first question. How old are you? Can you unmute yourself or write in the chat window what kind of mistake do you see it? What kind of mistake do you see in this question? The first, the first thing, what Zara mentioned is the font style. Oh my God, never use such fonts when you're preparing forms. This is already very big zoom, what you are seeing, but on your phone, it's not possible to read it. And yet Google Forms, they prompt you, they invite you to use one of such fonts. So just stick with a normal font. But also another thing, what Claudia noticed is overlapping answers. And also Sophia, I see. So if you are 30 years old, good luck. If you are 20, well, and you have to choose something. So how it should look, of course, you can guess now, is 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, etc. Any type of answer you're collecting, make sure they are not overlapping when it's just one choice question. Okay, here, with the next question, it says your name, and I want to say Goshka Tur. Yes, it's also noted as a first question, strange, but And look, I type my name, and it tells me, please add a number. What? It's supposed to be a name. So what happened here? I can show you in another window how the form was created. There was there was an option to make for a short answer text, I asked, but there was a validation of the response required. And somebody who was trying to validate, so to set the validation rules, made a mistake. The person set a rule that it must be a number in the answer and not a text. So it should be a text and not a number. So I will come back to it, but in Google Forms, you have some possible validation rules. And if you set them wrong, it might be that you can't fill in the form appropriately. Then we have the next question. Maybe let's go like this. How do you rate your knowledge of the topic? And there is this drop-down menu and these answers. What is maybe not good here or not clear? How do you rate the knowledge of the topic? What is wrong in this question? Yeah, there is no description. Okay, so we don't know if 1 is the lowest knowledge or 6 is the lowest one. I was born in Poland, where 6 is the best mark you can get at school. And then I was extremely shocked to know that, for example, in Germany, 6 was the worst grade or something. We have some people from Germany, so you can confirm if it's still the same. And 1 was the best grade. So, you know, depending even on the country you come from, 1 can seem to you as, wow, the best or the worst grade. So always, always specify. Then, there is the next question. What is your opinion about Service Civil International? And you can choose one answer. Do you see something methodologically faulty? Yes, Salom is not very nuanced. That's true. It is biased. Simply this type of cafeteria, this type of choices is totally biased. So you cannot be absolutely angry or thinking that CI is absolutely terrible in this form. If you think that it's extremely bad, you can't have this choice. You can only say not good. And by the way, this is a true question. You know who used it? Which huge institution? YouTube. So YouTube made a survey, a poll. How do you feel about YouTube today? And as you can guess, it made people so angry and frustrated. It went viral and people went really very irritated with YouTube. So don't do the same mistake, because don't make the same mistake. You might get some bad results. And people will really think that Service Civil International is not good. We, of course, know it's absolutely outstanding. Yeah, and as Leonie said, why do you ask this question? Yeah, of course, this is a very bad registration form. Then the next question is, choose 3 workshops you will participate in. And this is what I can do. So what is the mistake? Can you see? Choose 3 workshops you will participate in. Huh? Yeah, no multiple choice. And you might be saying, hey, Goshka, in the 21st century, why are you showing me these basics? Trust me, it's far too often when I find some things in registration forms. So really somebody needs to check the form before clicking the word, this button publish. We are slowly getting to the end. Here below, there is a question, provide your motivation to participate in the event, minimum 500 characters. So what you think is not perfect in this type of question? It could be 500 characters is a lot. And Sophia thinks, I hope maximum. Apart from the length, if we say that minimum 500 characters, if we say that it must be really 500 characters, because the event is a 5-year-long training course, or in fact, you're getting married and you're putting your motivation for a marriage. What is also difficult here? So you start writing and you start writing and you start writing and you totally get track of what you started in the beginning. So here, what you gave as an option for the type of the answer was a short response. In Google Forms, it is called short answer text. In fact, Google is very wise. When I was typing this question and I wrote minimum 500 characters, it gave me an option of a paragraph, which is a much bigger box that will then appear. So you will see the big box, you can write 500 characters, you will see everything perfectly, all the paragraph that you wrote. But if you are making a very bad online form, then you choose short answer, and then you end up in a small window with people who lost track of where they started. So I see Araniak is asking about this option, how to avoid it. So in the Google Forms, instead of the short answer type of question, you choose a paragraph, and then it will be a much bigger box that will appear. And one last thing that I also hate as a sociologist, the last question, what do you want to learn during our training? And here, voila, I can even tick a few things. But guess what makes me angry? What is wrong with this question? Why somebody can be frustrated? Okay, I see Claudia is saying, I cannot add anything personal. And that's true. Like, I want to learn how to cook a Brussels sprout. I don't care about cauliflowers. And there is no option for Brussels sprout, or there is no other option. So what you should do always in such cases is, if you're in Google Forms, you can make an option other. So then somebody who wants to learn how to cook a cauliflower, or sorry, Brussels sprout or a mango, then can add it and nobody will get frustrated. And maybe you will learn something interesting, like nobody's curious about cauliflowers. Everybody wants to learn something about durian. Yeah, so that was a quick exercise with the most, or how was it called? Extremely very not good registration form. And please never do the same thing when you are creating yours. But that was mistake number 3. Shortly about 2 other mistakes that I noticed, and I also asked people around what they don't like now when they register for events. People don't like if in the registration form you behave as if your online event was an offline one. What does it mean? Often you have the same registration deadline very much in advance as you would have for an offline event. And come on, you don't need to buy train tickets to the training course. So you don't need to close the registration 2 months in advance. People don't plan online events so early. So even in case of this webinar, we closed the registration around, 36 hours before the event. I was already thinking, maybe that's a bit too early. But still, I wanted to learn your questions before I start showing you the presentation. I wanted to have the possibility to add something. So in the online registration processes, you usually close the registration at a much later date because people don't need to plan that early. And what also I heard makes people angry, in some cases, it's possible to register only 1 person per organization. It might be valid if it's a specific training course and you only have 20 places because you will be working in smaller groups and you will all get, I don't know, access to some special platform with only 20 places. But if it's a webinar or info session, it makes no sense to limit it to 1 person per organization. And there are some big European Union institutions who were doing info sessions, limiting the number of people to 1 per big organization, which really made no sense because in the end there was somebody speaking with a presentation, no interaction, no breakout rooms. So take it into consideration when you do your presentation and you do your event. Then some people forget about the time zone issue. So you advertise your event, you forget to make a note in which time zone it is. If you registered for this event, you could maybe notice that we had a time zone support. You could click on a link and then you were brought to a timeanddate.com website where it was visible what time our event will start. And thanks to it, we have some people from other continents who are not afraid of calculating what Central European time might mean for them. And one more thing that I sometimes makes me laugh. I really saw in one registration form a question, are you vegetarian? There was, the question about dietary requirements. And I'm like, oh, that's very kind if we meet somewhere physically, but for the online course, I don't think it's very valid. So with this, my last point is ignoring the data protection and privacy. So we will have Chantal who will speak about it, and some people forget to put the privacy note or they don't know how to do it. Some people get registrations for the event, for example, via Google Forms, and then they send an open email with emails visible to everybody. And they're like, hello, welcome to our event. This is the Zoom link. So always put people in a blind copy if you don't want to make some enemies in the world. Sometimes you have the privacy policy, but it's not really visible. I want to show you one example of a page of one SCI project now. This is a screenshot of what I saw when I entered a page to register for a climate activist online challenge. And I was like, okay, wonderful. They want my first name, last name, email, but it's not written. Who organizes it? What they will use my email for? They even, maybe, you know, they will sell my kidney or something. There's nothing about the data protection. And I did not somehow notice that there is this possibility to scroll down, because the page looked so beautiful. And I signed up, and only after some time, when I came back to the website, I noticed that if I really zoom out, so make the thing smaller, I will see that there is some contact and data policy. But simply on the screen, it was not visible, and probably half of the people are same idiots as I was, not noticing it and getting angry unnecessarily. So the the question to you would be, yeah, if you have any favorite mistakes in the registration processes you notice or not, or maybe some tips, and please feel free to share in the chat. And I know we have one person with whom I was chatting, and I would like to invite Britta from SCI Germany to turn up your volume and explain what maybe not tragedy, but a pitfall you ended up with, and maybe some tips how to omit this situation.
Yes, thank you, Goshka, and hello to everyone. I'm Britta, as was already mentioned, and thanks a lot for this event. I already learned a lot, and I'm also already very much entertained because I find myself in many of the mistakes that you have already described, Goshka. For example, the issue of declaration of attendance. We're now planning our next online work camp with international volunteers, and attendance for the whole duration of the project was always an issue. We have discussed it so much, but we never came to the idea that we could just make a declaration at least of attendance and have volunteers sign up for it. So thanks for this. Yeah. Okay, I'm a project manager at SCI Germany. I fear most of you don't know me yet because I'm rather new in SCI. But I would like to share with you a few experiences that SCI Germany has made last year with the question of finding the right or suitable participants for your online event. And this, of course, takes us a little bit away from the Google Forms now, but it's more about how to find the right composition of people through whatever tool you're using for your registration. By promoting our online events, especially through social media, of course, we can reach all kinds of audiences and participants, which is, of course, good because we want our projects to be seen and we want them to be known, and we also want to have a good number of people involved. And for example, now I take this from SCI Germany. We have organized quite a number of work camps or international youth encounters with very sensitive topics also for many years. And for example, we have project partners from memorial sites to Nazi crimes in World War II. So very sensitive topics. And last year, according to the pandemic, we reconceptualized these work camps into online formats for the first time, and also advertised them widely through the social networks to find good numbers of participants. But then, as we learned last year from some practical examples, the numbers of participants are not the only things that count, but it's also about the quality or the motivation of people. Quality is not a good word. The motivation and the let me say the motivation and maybe the qualifications of people. And what we did, SCI Germany and the project partners, we used two different registration formats for the volunteers. The memorials did not ask participants for a motivation letter or anything like that, which is different from what SCI Germany does. And since some of the volunteers had registered directly through the memorial, the SCI Germany as an organization lost a little bit of control over who participated in the online work camps and with which motivation. And this then led to massive problems during the project, as some volunteers dealt very insensitively with the war theme in general, and also with the topic of commemoration, and also with each other, with other participants in the group. And this again put a lot of strain on one, the group dynamics in the online event, which were rather good, but yeah, now strained by some difficult opinions or exclamations of single people. And it put a very big strain on the group coordinator, who had to organize everything and make sure that everybody in the group feels comfortable and also safe. And it also put a lot of strain on the two organizations of the Memorial and of SCI Germany in our cooperation, which which was at some point at a very tricky point. And so after some long and very intensive discussions in the team and with the project partner, it turned out that due to the different registration processes, the quality control of participants or volunteers could no longer take place, so to speak. So the standards that we usually set through our registration procedure with letters of motivation, for example, they were no longer uniform, and the SCI Germany could no longer check the registrations that came through the memorials. And as a result, people had registered who did not sufficiently share the values of our organization, which then again led to the problems that I described earlier. So for us, what we learned from this last year is that it turns out that not only the numbers count, but it's also very essential to find the right suited participant for your event. And this is true for online events just as much as for the on-site events, or how did you put them, Goshka? The offline, the offline events. Even though, of course, interaction between the participants is not as intense as in real offline work camps, for example, or other encounters. So the outcome of our very intensive reflections and discussions with the project partner was that in future, of course, we will have all registrations on one uniform portal, which could, for example, be Google Docs, or for the WordCamps, it is it's, for example, the OPS or whatever platform you have, but it should be one, so that you have or we as an organization have the comparability between the applications, which can then lead to a selection process by the involved organizations, and also to a composition of really motivated and really suitable participants for the online event. And we also learned that in case of any doubt, it is good to communicate with the people who registered, in case there are not too many. Of course, you cannot communicate with everybody, but if you have just a smaller number, then also direct communication was helpful in this case. Yeah, this is, I just wanted to share with you on behalf of SCI Germany, this little experience, because we found it very crucial, and it gave us a lot of, it costed us a lot of effort to go through this. So this is why I contributed. And if you have any comments, let's get back to me.
Thank you very much, Britta. I see also some comments appearing in the chat window. So I will maybe let you discuss in the chat, like all participants. And really, please note it down, everybody, that it's also very important to not only to structure your form well or take care of the technicalities, but also think if there's one or two recruitment channels, and also what type of participants you actually want to admit, and how also what type of knowledge you need to know, you need to have to choose the best persons. We are, of course, not speaking about short meetings when there's one talking head like me here mostly, but there are some courses, like you mentioned, Britta, that are super delicate, sensitive, and even one person out of 10 that is not the right one can really destroy the dynamics. So thanks a lot for sharing. And having said this, I invite you still to share any tips or failures in the chat window. If we have time in this question or discussion section, we will come back to them. Still, before that, there's something else on our menu, and I want to go back to or go further to the next point. I want to do something that is impossible to do. So to give you a crash guide that will help you to discover some hidden wonders of Google Forms. It's kind of impossible to do it in 15 or 20 minutes because you all have different level of knowledge. So maybe some of you will be like, oh, wow, great. Or some of you will be like, I know it. And some others, too difficult, I don't grasp it. But still, I want to try. Because I believe you will maybe discover some options that can be used when you organize your next online event. And some basic questions you also asked in the registration process are, for example, why Google Forms? Why are we sponsored SCI by Google Forms? What are the alternatives? And no, SCI doesn't get any money from Google so far. And yet Google Forms is a free of charge tool that as a trainer, I observed is most widely used across NGOs that work with volunteers or organize different types of events. So in a non-governmental sector, also educational one, this is a very frequent tool. And when I work as a freelance trainer with many institutions, I don't know, like 40 in the last year, 95% of them used Google Forms for registration. Are there alternatives? Yes, of course. Now there are Microsoft Forms. There are some smaller websites that you can choose. For example, in Germany, Germany is known for being very much concerned with privacy. So they have plenty of different tools, kind of local tools that don't collect maybe so much data from the users. There are also paid options like JotForm, Lime Survey, SurveyMonkey. They all have some free, you can make maybe one survey through or up to 10 questions. They have limitations. Google Forms doesn't have any limitations. Why also it's beautiful? It's very intuitive. It's very simple to manage. For those 1 or 2 people here that might not be using Google Forms so far, like when I look at the list of participants, you can have a try and go to the website here and try to make the first form. There's a question of security because we always think Google and security. So I have good news. Maybe you will not believe me, but I read all the privacy policy of Google, maybe as the only person in the world. And well, yes, when it comes to privacy, of course, Google says it collects your data. Moreover, it can collect not only your data as the person creating the form, but it can also analyze the answers. There are some possibilities for you to control it. So you can switch off some options, but usually by default they are on. So you need to find the privacy options and to switch off some of them. Then still Google explains how it uses the data. And it's the same across if you have Gmail or Google Drive or you use Google Maps, it's the same privacy policy. So they say they use this to improve their services, also for targeted advertising, unless you check this option, like to get rid of this option in the privacy section of Google. So yes, some data is collected, and then you have to, of course, decide is it okay or not. Just a tip: if you have Facebook or WhatsApp or Skype, any other tool, for sure the same amount of data is collected by the other big providers as well. So if you have some nice alternatives that maybe are not so possessive when it comes to personal data, please also write in the chat window. We can then separately, individually explore it after the webinar. To learn more about the privacy and also some basics of Google Forms, the address for the privacy note or privacy explanation is quite simple. You can see it now on the screen. If you are new to Google Forms, you can try things yourself. It's very easy, intuitive, or you can go on YouTube channel, and there are a number of tutorials, usually around 15-20 minutes long, that show you how to make your first form, your first survey from the beginning till the end. I very much like the Simpletivity channel. It's a channel that gives you tips on how to use online tools better, not only Google, but also Zoom, and a number of various tools that we are getting used to now in the online world. So again, non-paid advertising, simply a very genuine recommendation to have a look at the Scott Friesen's videos at Simpletivity. Then there are some more questions you were having about things like what are the add-ons, or is there an option to edit after you submitted the form, or what about this response validation, how to use graphics, is it possible to add images, etc., etc. So I will go back to Google to show you some of the possibilities it gives using an online registration form, like a sample registration form. Now, or in a second, you should be able to see the screen of my browser. And there is kind of a similar survey to what you were seeing in when you were registering for this webinar. I just added some things at the end. First of all, it is possible in Google Forms to enable users to edit their answers after they submit. And there are a few ways to do it. First of all, just to reiterate why it might be useful for you. For example, you forgot one question to the Google form. And then instead of making the second one and asking somebody, now please fill it in one more time, you ask the people, go back to the forms, there is one more question, and people will go back and they will fill it in. So also for the people, if they made a mistake, if they registered for some sessions they cannot attend, they can instantly uncheck their choices. And you have access to the last, like the latest results. Also, you see in the Google Forms, because let's have a look, the responses, you can see either here. No, don't worry, you see my email address, but all the world knows it, so I'm not concerned about its privacy. But you can also export the responses into a spreadsheet, and there it will mark with a red triangle if your responses were edited. So now, how to do it so that you can edit the responses after you submit. You should check the settings option. And in the general part, you should, so this is unchecked by default. But first of all, you have to check collect email responses. And automatically, the first question that will appear at the very top of the registration form will be your email address. Then do check the response receipts. So it means that you will want the respondents to receive a copy of their response. But then check here again that you want always the people to receive the response receipt, always. And what else? This option below, just a moment, maybe you will see better if I use the spotlight. So here, this option below allows you to edit your form after submit. So again, if you check it, then this type of setting is perfect for you when you want people to be able to come back to the form and to edit it. What will happen? The people will get an email address after they submit the form, and I will show you how this email looks like, how this registration confirmation looks like. So in a moment, you will see a PDF of the email. Just what you need to know is that originally it looks much nicer. There is a nice layout and some nice blue button. But simply this Microsoft printer to PDF destroys all these beautiful graphics. So what you see now is a PDF. It says, thanks for filling out the registration form. Here's what we got from you. And here are all my responses. Here I cannot edit them, but I can, this button, so one more time, this button, edit response, is originally nice big blue button. So you can just keep the email as a participant in your mailbox, and whenever you want, you can click on the button and edit the response. What is more, there is a link that you can also copy paste. There is a link to your response. So even if you need, you can send this link URL to another person saying, hey, can you check my responses and maybe edit them? And of course, it can be useful for you to announce to the participants, hey, look, you will get a confirmation email. Please keep it in your mailbox in case you want to change your responses. And it is also possible because you can let the participants know in the confirmation message what they should do. So again, now you should be able to see the browser. And we were before in the general settings. So this is your ideal setting if you want the people to edit their responses. In the presentation here, you can change the confirmation message. And we press cancel, we go back. Some other questions you were asking. Is it possible to beautify the form? And yes, for those that haven't worked with Google, there is this very easy, again, button, customize theme. And if you click on it, you can choose the colors, you can choose the font. Just please don't choose the same font I was showing you before. And you can also upload your picture. Yeah, so you see on the right that you can also upload an image. We have our logo here. You can upload videos or graphics, pictures. And again, some people asked about it, so I want to show. On the right side, first of all, there is a button that is always sliding there, ready to either add a new answer, question, or add some graphics or a video. So what you can do, you can record a welcome message and put it there. So people will simply see some hello message from you. But also when you make a new question, so now I pressed add question. And let's see if Google will cooperate with me or it will be slow. Where am I now with my new question here? So I can type the question or I can add some graphic, so a picture, because maybe I want people to speak or answer a question about the picture, like which logo do you like the most? And it's possible to upload an image both in the description of the question and in the answers. So when you can add images as answers. What is more, you can even ask people to upload pictures as answers. So here there's a question that is, send us your picture so that we include it in the gallery of participants. And from the different options that I had here, like checkboxes, dropdown, etc., I chose file upload. Still, be careful, because if you choose a file upload, okay, you can do some settings like what is the maximum size, what type of image it's going to be. But first of all the files will go to your Google Drive. And if you don't have much space, it can get a bit crowded. So there will be a folder automatically created in your Google Drive with the name of the form. Secondly, the form will go on the web. So anybody can upload anything. Somebody can be uploading maybe some spam or inappropriate content, or if you don't allow specific file types, if you don't limit them, some people may be uploading, I don't know, a virus even. So this is, you need to really think if you would like to use this option if you open the form to just everybody. Here I also want to show you how it can look, how can registration to sessions look, because of course you can make a drop-down menu or a list, but for example, have a look at this question. Please mark which sessions you declare to attend. So let's say you have a training course and you want to make a invite people to mark only those that they will attend. So you can make a grid where people will simply check which sessions they attend on the basis of a picture. So you don't need to repeat all the names again. Here it's a bit faulty because the picture doesn't match the real sessions that are described in the grid. But you can imagine here a picture with 4 days and 3 sessions, and then people say which ones they will attend. What is more, if they change their mind, there is the edit after submit option. They can always uncheck some things, and you have the latest information. So this is a very useful option. And here, if I go to this question in my developer's view, again, I will show you this the checkbox grid that I chose to create the question, and I uploaded an image, and there are some rows and columns that I chose. And one last thing, because I will then give a bit of space also to Chantal to speak about privacy, and maybe then we can go back to some specific questions that you might be asking. One last thing are the add-ons. So in my form, you can see a small icon in the top right corner, but probably you don't have it if you don't use it. So if you open the hamburger menu, these are the 3 dots on the right side, you will see add-ons. If you click on it, you will find the whole world of additions to your form that can make it very useful in case you need it. So now, while it's loading, I will tell you that add-ons are like external applications, but that can do more magic with your forms. For example, what I have installed is a form limiter. So this is something that you see here. And this is an add-on that allows you to set a date and time after which the form will be inactive. Plus, even more interesting, it allows you to limit the number of responses. This is something Google doesn't do. So you need this add-on, form limiter, very well rated, to say that, for example, you only accept the first 50 people who register. There are also other possibilities. For example, there is choice eliminator, but something got broken and now it's kind of badly reviewed. But there are also add-ons that allow you to choose, they allow you create a form which gives different meeting times, and people can choose the time they want to meet you, for example, for a mentorship session. And then once they choose this option, it will disappear from the form because it's taken. So the choice eliminator type of add-ons, they allow you to make kind of a calendar. And once somebody chooses an option, it disappears. So in this way, it is possible to maybe schedule some individual meetings. The problem is that with most of the tools I was reading about, analyzing, they have some faults. So in some cases, there are some small disasters. And there are also different things if you use Google Forms during your sessions, like a timer, there are also yeah, I think certify them is also quite kind of nice. If you need a few people to approve a participant, for example, then you can set a workflow with the certify them add-on. And there will be a few people who will, maybe 2 or 3 prep team members, who will be able to accept a participant before they get the final acceptance. It's kind of complex, and I don't want to go into details now. You might be, staring at me like, what is this? But I just want you to remember the name, certify them, so that later on you can have a look. You already know where to look for the add-ons. And one more time, to the right, and then you click add-ons. If you have them already installed, you can see them here in in this above section. There are a few things here about I also have send certificates and add-on. So it's also possible to automatize sending certificates. Like if you have a course where you want people to go through a test, and then that automatically they get a certificate, then there is one add-on for this as well. Now, I really need to stop sharing all these hidden treasures, because I want to go get forward to the Brussels sprout of our webinar. So just the last 2 slides to show you, and then maybe we come back to some things. If you are having an online course where you want people to register to different sessions, for example, you have optional sessions, you can also try a method we used at the Peace in Practice training last year. I see some people who attended here among the participants. We created a subscription sheet where, so like a Google spreadsheet, where we gave some instructions. We also gave description of all sessions. And then in the table, everybody, there were names, but I removed them for privacy reasons. Everybody was simply writing if they would attend or not. This was a closed group. We knew each other. The names were not secret. We trusted each other. So we did not think that somebody would, destroy the results of another person. And people simply could go and edit their answers as it went. And people were changing also the answers as it continued. So this is one more thing. And I also saw the question about the free of charge add-ons or not. Most of them are, like some of them are a bit paid. For example, with the Create Certificate add-on, it's free of charge if there is the branding of the add-on at the bottom. If not, you pay $10 per 1 year. And $10 per 1 year is not too much. But any registration form would be not worth its value if it doesn't have the data protection ensured, and if there is no privacy policy note. So here we come to our Brussels sprout, and I don't mean you, Chantal, it's just the topic that is of this type. And please enlighten us, because it's something that even I still struggle with when it comes to the data protection of our people registering for the events.
Thank you, Goshka, and hello, everybody. Nice to meet those that I haven't met yet, and nice to see some familiar faces. My name is Chantal. I'm currently the international coordinator in the International Secretariat, and I'm also the one in charge of GDPR on an international level. Now, I like Brussels sprouts. I think that they're healthy and they taste nice, but I also know that they're not always everybody's favorite and maybe an acquired taste. So I'm going to try to give you some information about GDPR to get you a little bit more comfortable with it. And also, if there's any questions at the end, or you can always drop me an email if there's something further clarifications. So GDPR otherwise stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, which basically is a law that focuses on how organizations and groups use personal data. Now, by personal data, they really mean anything that is connected to an individual. So this could be your name, this could be an email if your email has your name in it, this could be your date of birth. This could also, in specific cases, be a combination of information. So for example, you've gone to a work camp, you're 24, we don't have your name anymore, we've taken your name and your email away, but we do have the information that somebody attended a work camp in Spain who was 24, came from Sweden, and took the bus. This is enough for some people to be able to identify you. So this we would then also classify as personal data. So the law is very specific in what you can and cannot keep. It's just a little confusing, I know, sometimes in how you actually need to implement it. So I'm not going to go really into the details of what the law says, but I am going to go very practically and focus on what you're supposed to have as an organization, what you need to add in for these kind of forms, and some examples that I'll show at the end of how we in the office actually deal with this. So your GDPR from the office should actually have 3 things. And this doesn't mean that you have to create it for every single event. This is your standard 3 things that you should have in the office or in your organizations that you then refer to and you keep sending people to when they want to have more information. So what are the components? You need to have a data audit and compliance plan. Sounds scary, it's not. Basically, it is just, you're going to look at everywhere that you take personal data. That's the audit part. And then you're going to discuss and see how you can actually make sure that you keep that data safe, that you delete the data when you no longer need it, and you're going to keep track of how you're actually collecting the data. In GDPR, there are certain regulations for when you need to ask for permission and when you don't. And so very clear example of when you don't need to ask permission is, for example, for a newsletter. If the registration form for that newsletter is very clear that you are only registering for this newsletter and that's the only time that they're going to use your email and you only ask for the email, you don't need to ask for permission. Gorshka made an example. It is indeed better to do a clear link where you can see so that people feel more comfortable and so that there's information, but the actual permission you don't need. Now, focusing this presentation a little bit specifically on events and on trainings. In this case, you really do need that permission because you need their information about are they going to attend? You need sometimes the age information, like in this case, because of funding. The only time when you don't need this information is when you're not asking people to register. So that kind of stuff goes into the plan. Now, the protection policy is actually quite a short document. It basically is you describing how you are going to keep all the information safe. Are you going to lock it? Who has access to it? How do you make sure that only the correct people have access to it? What are you going to do in case somebody gets access to that data that you didn't want something that's called a breach? And you also need to describe your responsibility towards individuals. So for example, if there is a breach, say you had an Excel file somewhere and there were 200 participant information on it, and you found out that somebody collected this through your email and you're not sure who it is. In this case, you actually legally have to let all of those 200 people know that this happened so that they can keep themselves safe, so that they can make sure that if they see something funny happening with their personal data, that they're aware of it. And that is your responsibility as an organization that's keeping this information. It happens rarely, but it's something to keep in mind. Finally, and that's where we're going to focus on for this presentation, is something called a privacy notice, also sometimes called a privacy policy. What this is depending on what you're doing, normally it's a few sentences that describes why you are asking for the information that you're asking for. What are you going to do with it? Who has access to it? And how long are you going to keep that information? All of this is normally then connected to a sort of link that then goes to your policy or your plan so that they can get more information. But the law is very clear in that previously, before GDPR, you know, when you signed up to Google or you signed up to a course, they would be like, check our terms and conditions. And it was this huge file with all of these numbers and like legal text, and nobody understood what any of it was. GDPR is basically focused on making it understandable for people. So you're not supposed to use complicated language. You're not supposed to say like, oh, we're going to do this with this tech advisor and this PO3 or whatever. No, you are supposed to say we're going to use your information like this. We need it because of that, and it will be deleted in 1 year, 2 years after the event, whatever. Now, there are some tips to follow before we go into the examples that I'm going to show. Just these are general tips. You always need to apply it to your own reality, but generally you should always ask for permission if you're doing a public event and you're asking people to register. The law for GDPR is only focused on individuals not directly associated with your organization. So if a volunteer pays a membership fee to your organization, you don't have to really care about them in terms of GDPR. In the international office, we try to be safe with people's information across the board. And so we do it for everybody. It doesn't matter if they've paid a membership fee or not, or if they're a staff member or not, we do it just in general. But legally, you only have to do it for people who are not somehow financially tied or like a proper member of your organization. But as a general tip, ask for permission if you're doing a public event. Make sure that you know where you're storing your information. I know that when you do a lot of events, sometimes Excel sheets can go missing or you're not 100% sure where it goes. Just make sure that you have a very clean data management system in folders and whatever, so you actually know where to go in case somebody asks you to delete their information. Remember to delete the unnecessary data. So don't keep it in files in 6 years' time and open it up and then like, oh, I don't know who this person is or where all this information is. The reason for these last two is because if somebody requests for their information to be deleted, you have 30 days the time to delete all of their information that you hold for them anywhere. And that is a legal restriction. Now, everything that I'm saying, I will say, is very specific for Europe or for organizations that also work with Europeans. And so it's become sort of like a global standard, but the laws in every individual country outside of the European Union may be different. And so you might have to look into that. But in general, for European or European Union citizens, when we ask somebody to forget us, they have 30 days the time to remove us from all of our platforms. So for SCI, specifically international, if a volunteer comes to us and say, we want to be forgotten, we would have to delete all of their information from all of the trainings, all of the work camps, etc., as long as we can for our funding. So if our funding restricts it, they've given us permission. So then we get back to them and say, we can't do that. It needs to be in 3 years. You gave your permission. Every other case, you have only 30 days the time, which is very, very short. So that's why it's really important to know where you're storing the information and make sure that you make a habit of deleting this information. Now, some examples of what we kind of use in our forms. And a note, we always put our privacy notices all the way at the end of the form. And that's the idea of like, normally in this case, this is what I would consider a simple event registration. This is actually the registration that we used for our international committee meeting. And by simple event, I mean it's one event that's happening over one period of time. We don't need their information after that event for any reason. We just need to contact them before and during the event. And so the way that we do this is we put this text that says why we are getting the information, how it will be used. We give a link to our protection policy. And I also make sure to make it above the submit button in the Google Forms, because then it says that by pressing submit, you are actually already giving us permission. So this is for a very simple event. When you have a more complicated event, like a project training, for example, it gets a little bit messier and you need to give more information because you also will need to share the information with other organizations. And so this was the privacy notice, for example, that we used for a training that was called ABCD. It gives the information about who is the donor. It gives the information about when and how we're going to use everybody's information, when we will delete that information, as well as the links to our plan and our policy. Because we made this a second section, we also then actually ask people to specify that they have read and understood the above stated privacy notice before they actually press submit. And so you need to see a little bit about how far and how much you're going to use people's personal data in order to know which kind of privacy policy you're going to use. This one is quite large. So it really depends a little bit on what you as a person would feel comfortable with. So always try to put yourself in the mind of the participant. So what about images? Because I know that this was also a conversation. There's two ways that you can ask for image consent. One way is to actually simply ask it in the form so that when people register, you actually get an indication about whether they're going to give you, whether they're okay with you using their image. And by their image, you know, in Zoom, it means your screenshot. So it's easier because we just ask people to turn their pictures off. In a physical event, it's much more difficult because you take pictures during the event. So we've actually spent quite a few hours going through pictures and actually making sure that if somebody says no, they don't agree, that we don't share any of these pictures where they are recognizable. So if it's the back of their head, it's fine as long as there's no recognizable features like tattoos or anything like that. If it's the front of the picture, we delete the picture because they haven't given us permission. Another way of doing this is that the person who organizes the event can actually simply ask everybody for permission, and they can come up to them. And then the organizer of the event basically confirms to the organization that they've done this, and they become sort of this quality check. And that's also very acceptable when it comes to images. So last points to keep in mind is that the organizer of the event is always the one who's responsible for the data protection and also the ones who acts as the backup plan. So this means both the organization, but also the facilitator or organizer of the physical and the online event. You should always have one person responsible for GDPR in the organization. Normally in your data protection policy, it actually states who it is. So for example, my name is on that policy at the moment, and this is simply because if the organization does legally something wrong, they then have somebody to contact directly. It's always better to announce verbally when something's needed during a meeting. So, you know, Koshka at the beginning of this meeting saying like, we're not taking video, we're not taking any of this. Often we ask people for permission to video. And so it's always better to also say it verbally, even if you've put it in the registration form. And finally, try to only keep personal data for long times when there's a strong need, if it's legally required from your funders. If you want to create some kind of volunteer database, this is all fine, but don't just store information because you forget about it or because it's easier not to delete it. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. I think there might be some questions, but also if you do have any questions, put it in the email.
Yeah. There was one question from Ismi, how to prove that we have deleted the data upon the requests of people, you know, after the 30 days?
Trust. I'm afraid that they have to trust you and you have to trust them at that point. We can't really give, you know, when you send an email to a volunteer and say, hey, we've deleted your data, this is you actually legally telling them that you've done the data. So you're also, if it turns out not to be true, you can get into trouble as an organization for fraud is not the right word, but something along those lines.
Thanks a lot. These are all the questions I think I saw about the data protection. And I think, yeah, that it was a good, in a nutshell, summary. I hope we'll be able to analyze very closely, maybe at the recording, all the contents of the privacy notes that you showed us, because then it's a text that is kind of ready for copy pasting. Well, it's based on European law, but it can be applicable everywhere, maybe with some small changes. And in the meantime, I also added in the chat window some answers to the questions you had about the parts I was presenting before. Also for the green horse, for the ones new to Google Forms, I pasted two tutorials that I think can be useful for those that are not that knowledgeable about the Google Forms. And also I created one more thing I'm pasting now. There was a person who registered with a very specific, very advanced question, how to track progress of participants during some activities they will be running. I put one video that might be useful for you. But if you are not this person, maybe you should not click on it because it's very advanced. Okay, so thank you, Chantal, one more time. I think it's also time to open the floor for any thoughts or questions that you might still be having. Maybe you forgot or I forgot about something. Maybe there was still something promised and it's still not here with us, the topic. So yeah, feel free to ask or share.
Hello, I would like to ask a question regarding the registration form. One of the doubts that we normally have is once we have all the responses, when should we send back, I don't know, the link to the meeting, especially when it's like an open meeting, training or whatever, like for random people that will register. When is the best time to actually send them back the link? Like the same day of the meeting, 2 days before, because we're always discussing that and we are not really sure when would it be.
Thank you, Mikael. I will answer from my perspective and I will invite the others also to share your experience. If it is a short meeting, then and it's really like open to the public, so you don't care who will attend, it's just enough that they register, I would put the link to the meeting in the confirmation message and send the confirmation message to the person, like to every registered person. So once they fill in the form, they have the link and they can put it in the calendar. And then one day before the event, to remind all the registered persons. So again, hidden copy and email to everybody. And I think that if you don't do it, I think sending a link one day before or 2 days before is too late because first of all, there is this anxiety in the people. They are thinking, okay, I registered, but there is silence. What's happening? What's happening? So it's better to send it in advance or tell people, we will send you the link 2 days before the event. That's what we promised. And that's what we did. So you had this peace of mind. Plus, there's always an email address they can contact in case of doubts. But I also want to ask the others here, when would you send the link to the meeting? Does the silence mean that you have no idea or you simply agree? Okay, I see Britta agreeing.
I think for us, the reminder email is super important. So the one the day before or a few hours before, I've noticed that people, especially if you send it through email, they lose track of it. And so if it's a big meeting, we normally send the link maybe a week before or something like that. But definitely, regardless of when you send it the first time, sending it the day before is kind of crucial for us.
Thanks. So that's kind of answers from our point of view, and I have a look in the chat. There is also there is also the thoughts from Mado, who lost the link, and in quite a lot of cases, people simply place the link on Facebook. So or Facebook, or it's publicly available, and just you click and you join. We didn't do it. We wanted to know who our participants are. We wanted to have also this kind of feeling of intimacy. We didn't want to have any trolls. So there's always, there are the pros and cons. Any other things that you would like to ask? If not, I will answer 2 or 3 questions I still had from your registration forms, even though not everybody appeared, but somebody was asking about connecting Google Forms with Google Analytics, how to do it possible. And I bet half of you, maybe half of us, doesn't know what Google Analytics are, but for those that know, it is possible to connect Google Forms with Google Analytics. You need to embed the form in your website and then copy paste the code in the Google Analytics, and then there will be like this dashboard created. If you Google like how to do it, you will get quite a number of tips. Like myself, I have never done it, even though I knew what Google Analytics is. But when I researched like for 10-15 minutes, I found quite a number of satisfactory answers. There was also somebody asking, is it possible to translate the Google form into multiple languages? And it's not possible with Google Form so far. So you cannot have the same form, but then showing maybe in different places on the world in different parts. So what is possible is that you create a question at the beginning of the form with a drop-down menu. Like the first question is, please choose your language, Albanian, Polish, Hindi, and then you create different sections of the forms. So sections are different parts of the forms, and depending on the first answer, the user will be taken to a different section. So the Albanian ones will go to Albanian forms, the Polish ones will go to Polish forms. Just remember, you will end up with a number of answers in all types of languages, unless you're a polyglot. And there was also a mention, last thing that I'm saying already, I promise. There was a question about notifications, so that you get a notification when people fill in your form. And it's possible to have it with some add-ons, like Elena explained. Myself, I make it easier. So again, you are in your dashboard. You should be seeing my browser now. And then you go from questions to responses. And again, a small hamburger menu. And voila, we have get email notifications for new responses. So I can check this option, and now I will get into my email the one with which the form was created, and notification every time somebody fills in the form. That's what I do, for example, at a very last minute moment before the event, if I don't want to miss somebody's registration. So these are some of the treasures or tips that we wanted to share with you today. And suddenly, I don't know how it happened. It's 1:30 here in Central European time in most of Europe. So I have to say with a great sorrow that I need to slowly wrap up this meeting at this moment. But two things. First of all, I would really appreciate if you write down some feedback in the chat window. Maybe one thing that you learned, or maybe was it the right duration of the event or too short, or we should have some individual consultations maybe for some interested persons. So please, if you want to have your voice heard, write in the chat window a few words of feedback to this webinar combined with lunch, dinner, or breakfast. And the second thing is that we will send you the recording of the webinar so that you can go through. If you have some specific questions that were not answered, please go to YouTube and find a tutorial. Please Google. Google Forms also have excellent support, excellent help. I hope it was kind of a nice appetizer for you, and now you are sate, digesting your main menu, Brussels sprout and dessert. And if you still think, oh gosh, Google didn't answer my question, and YouTube didn't answer my question, I still have something to discuss with Gośka, then in the webinar, my email address was publicly shown, or you can just Google my name and surname, and you can drop me an email. I will try to help you with your answer, with your question. And then if you are curious how to make your online event really thrive, really excellent, really involving, we have 2 webinars coming up at the end of February. The registration will open soon, so maybe see you in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much, and enjoy your day or your evening.